think we can probably make a start on the introductions at least, because I think we've got everyone's descriptions online anyway, and we are recording the session for anybody who does miss the start as well. So just for general introductions, this is the Sense CDT Careers panel. My name is Frances and I am a current PhD student with the Panorama DTP, who have been organising this in partnership with the Sense CDT. My PhD is in micropaleontology, hence the microscope, and geochemistry, and we're hoping to display a wide range of careers that you might wish to consider with a PhD. So a bit of information on the session. We are recording it and we're hoping to put it on the Sense YouTube channel after the event. The chat function that you normally see on Zoom is off for the event, but the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen should be working fine. So if you have any questions throughout the session, feel free to ask and we will try and get to them all towards the end of the session. Any questions that we aren't able to answer live today, we are hoping to try and answer between the panelists, and then we will send this out in supplementary material that we're hoping to send out towards the end of the week. And I think all that leaves me now is to introduce our panelists. So I think I'll go in the order that they are on my screen, if that's okay, that makes sense. So we have Heather from the Met Office, and we have
Go on.
we have Tom, if you want to wave. We've got Tom from SatSense, and we've got Ekbal from the British Geological Survey, and we've got Anna Maria from the European Space Agency.
Hi there.
Genevieve from Earthblocks, and we've got Craig from the University of Leeds. So we have some starter questions to kickstart the panel, and I think this is a nice background question that it would be nice if everybody could answer for us. And this is, what was your PhD in and what do you do now? So was your research directly related to your current job? And again, I think as she's first on my screen, I'm going to ask Heather to go first with this one. So what do you do now, and how was it related to your PhD?
Okay, so my PhD was, I guess it was in the area of remote sensing. So I worked on a satellite called SMOS, which is to do with soil moisture, looking at soil moisture from space. It's an ESA satellite. And I actually worked on the kind of modelling side, so I didn't see any data during my PhD. I worked on looking at radiative transfer modelling for how a rough surface affects the emissions for this particular satellite. So now I work at the Met Office. So I've been working there since December last year. And so I still actually work with satellite data. I work on, it's kind of, I would say it's sort of 50-50 academia and industry. And I work on doing research to better use satellite data for weather forecasts. So yeah, I would say it's pretty related to my PhD. It's I've kind of moved from the surface to the atmosphere, but yeah, it's quite related, I would say. Yeah.
That's great, thank you. Can I ask the same question to you, Tom? That was, what was your PhD in and what do you do now?
Cool, yeah, thanks. Oh, sorry, I just got an email. My name is Tom. I did a PhD using Earth observation as well to study earthquakes. So I used a radar satellite to monitor how the ground moves in earthquakes and in between earthquakes. And so these radar satellites are able to pick up very, very small movements, kind of millimeters per year of movement. And we use that to study how the continents deform and move around. So I did that looking at some earthquakes in Nepal and Pakistan and kind of a bit all over the place. Didn't get to go there, unfortunately. That's the one downside of using satellites. I now work for a small spin-out company called SatSense, and we use the same satellites to study ground movement in the UK. So less exciting forms of ground movement, no earthquakes really. No big ones anyways, but we study whether your house is subsiding or if there's a landslide that's going to impact on some infrastructure, something like that. So very, very related PhD to my job now.
Thank you. Very interesting. And I think I'll ask again some questions to Iqbal.
Hi everyone, yes, I'm Iqbal Hussain, and I did my PhD very similarly to Tom, actually. In fact, we had the same supervisor at Leeds, using these radar satellites to monitor ground motion with a technique called INSAR. But I focused specifically on the North Anatolian fault in Turkey, northern Turkey, where there's this big 1,000 kilometer long earthquake generating fault that's just had huge earthquakes over the last several centuries. So we were monitoring how this energy is getting built up on these faults and how they're released in earthquakes. So what I do now is at the BGS is I do some similar stuff to what I did to my PhD, but also broader. So most of my work these days is in poor countries, very poor countries. I'm monitoring earthquake hazards, landslide hazards, subsidence, and any sort of ground motion, but also related to things like seismic hazard and poverty and those kind of issues. So not only do I work with the technique that I've learned in my PhD, but I've broadened it out now into more social fields.
No, that's great. And it sounds like a really nice application of the work that you already learned to do. Anna Maria, what was your background, please?
So actually, I'm going to start off with not what I did in my PhD, but how I actually came into remote sensing. So far, we've had a lot of remote sensing. I didn't start off in remote sensing. I was a physicist before, but I was an astrophysicist and worked on radio astronomy back then. And I didn't actually want to do a PhD after I did my astrophysics degree. I decided that I wanted to broaden my understanding a bit more. I didn't see a career in academia at the time.
And maybe try to turn your camera off briefly. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I'll pop up again once I've spoken. Okay, let's do that. My broadband and my bandwidth connection here in rural Cumbria. Super fast broadband hasn't arrived here yet. So where was I? I was telling you about my second master's that I did, and which was actually aimed at people who wanted to work for international organizations such as the UN or other NGOs in environmental, working on environmental issues. But it was back then that I realized that actually, as I was a scientist, if I wanted to have more of an impact in this world, it would be really useful to have more of a specialization. So at that stage, I sort of sidestepped into remote sensing. There was an opportunity that came about at the local university. I was in Vienna at the time, Vienna University of Technology. And I started working on a project on change detection in permafrost regions. And I really got into that, and I took that forward into a PhD on monitoring surface hydrology in permafrost regions. So I basically, during my PhD, I developed an algorithm to improve the retrieval of surface inundation using synthetic aperture radar. So actually using similar radar to the ones described earlier, but a totally different technique. Well, how did this help me in my job? Well, I actually then did a postdoc. I did do a postdoc, but I didn't do the usual postdoc. I did a postdoc with the European Space Agency, so actually outside of academia, just researching within the organization. And that was again on permafrost and surface hydrology, but my team at the European Space Agency were mostly focused on creating climate data records. So I wrote a paper during my postdoc there on how we should be using these climate data records to feed into permafrost models. And actually one of my big achievements from back then was that was taken on as a project then. And later on, I got hired back into a job that would sort of supervise these types of projects. So yeah, it's a long way around. I definitely feel like my PhD was essential to the job that I do now, and yeah, not the usual way to get there, but definitely it's been a good ride.
Thanks for that, Anna Maria. Yeah, slightly different journey, very interesting, and very interesting that you thought you didn't want to do a PhD because you thought, oh, I'm not going into academia, why do a PhD? So I think that's quite good demonstration of why you should do a PhD if you want to. So I think I'll ask Genevieve now.
Great. So so my PhD was really focusing on, at the point, it's quite a few years ago, on remote sensing techniques for quantifying carbon stock and changes in forest ecosystems, and how do we implement those technology and techniques in the context of a policy decision making like the Kyoto Protocol, you know. So one has to take into consideration things like how is a forest defined, and then take those definitions which are politically defined into a technical side of things of how then do you quantify that forest and the change in forest. And one particular focus of my PhD was, at that point, again, very novel technique, LiDAR. I remember coming to present, you know, results from LiDAR and demonstrating how you could quite accurately assess forest height with that technology, and seeing staff here at Edinburgh University. I was then at Oxford, but I was coming to present being completely amazed at the power of that new technology and how accurate it was, and you know, everybody was thinking about how they could potentially use that tool in their own research. So it was very exciting times, very promising as well with the Kyoto Protocol, and sadly things are, you know, taking time, much longer than how we thought things would evolve. But yeah, so that was my PhD. And then after this, I am an academic, so I'm a senior lecturer in here in the School of Geosciences at Edinburgh University. But I've also, throughout my career and my research interests, been very much closely related to how do we operationalize the use of satellite imagery. So we now created a software. It's called Earthblocks, and it's hugely helpful for communities around the globe, NGOs, or anyone basically that has no skills in Earth observation, and they still want to, you know, access, for instance, Google Earth Engine or the huge planetary scale data set without coding. So our software basically makes satellite data accessible to everyone without, you know, a certain level of skill set. So it democratizes access, and we believe that a lot of the people that actually could benefit the most from satellite imagery actually cannot, and therefore that's what we do. So I'm being seconded for a number of years to do that, and then after this I'll come back to academia.
Oh, that's great, thank you very much. And then just finally, Craig, what was your PhD in and what do you do now?
Hi, so prior to my PhD, I actually did a degree in mathematics. So I'm a mathematician by trade. And when I finished that degree, I was like, I'm done with academia. So I actually quit my master's and then left to work in local government for a year in adult social care. But it was doing that job in particular and actually going through that process that made me realize actually having a PhD would allow me to have the impact required for me to make the changes that I wanted to do. So I did a slight change and I looked more at applications of mathematics, in particular fluid dynamics, which then got me into environmental sciences. And then I went on to then do a PhD trying to understand how we could improve fog forecasting by having a better understanding of the physics And in particular, the physics that I was looking at was the interactions between aerosols, which are pollutants, and fog microphysics. So that interaction. So that particular PhD also was of an interest to me, because obviously I had links with the Met Office as well as the University of Leeds. And then after I finished that PhD, which was last year, I'm now doing a postdoc where I'm now focusing on very similar work, but rather than looking at fog forecasting over the UK, I'm now looking at fog forecasting in India. And what I really like about that piece of work is that it allows me to have a much wider range of interactions with, say, policymakers as well as more scientists within the area. And what I've also definitely found is that it allows me to expand my networks within the school, because with the nature of something like fog in India, it's usually associated with air quality. And so what I've definitely found as me as a researcher is that I'm now talking to people who work in air quality on a regular basis, talking to people who work in climate projections. And that is what I'm now doing. So I'm a postdoc at the moment, looking to expanding my own research. So yeah, that's a quick summary.
No, thanks, Craig. Really nice answers of how you've been able to study the things that mattered to you as well. And there's a phrase that's come up a couple of times, and it's postdoc. And I was wondering, Craig, if you could please explain to everybody what a postdoc is. I guess following a PhD, some people go on to.
I should probably have explained that, given the fact that I had to explain this to my parents the other day, because they didn't actually understand what I do. So after you complete a PhD, in order for you to be able to progress in your academic career, you need to essentially do what's known as a research science position. So the full term is a postdoctoral researcher, but the shorter name is postdoc. And in order for me to be able to qualify for, say, lectureship positions, or say further senior fellowships, which allows me to do much bigger research on a greater scale, I will then be able to then say do a postdoc, which will then give me the skills to be able to then apply for those bigger positions. Now, you can go for those bigger fellowships and those bigger positions without necessarily doing a postdoc. However, I've definitely found that for me, doing a postdoc before going for those fellowships gave me the confidence to actually go, no, I know what I'm talking about. It's also given me the opportunity to widen my research. So too long, don't read. A postdoc essentially is a PhD but extended, but it's mostly focused on a particular research problem, and you don't have to write a thesis at the end.
That sounds like a bonus. Iqbal, would you like to contribute here?
It's not just a PhD, you also get paid a lot more.
That also sounds like a bonus.
I'm not sure that's true. I felt like I got a pay cut when I did mine, but depends.
Wow.
It's normally,
well, thank you very much.
Normally shorter than a PhD as well, isn't it? A postdoc. Yeah, like a few years rather than 3 to 5.
Yeah. So generally speaking, postdoc can. I've seen postdocs that have been 6 months. I've seen postdocs that have been 4 years. Whereas in the UK, for example, a PhD tends to range between 3.5 to 4 years, typically speaking. Sometimes it can be longer, but if you're doing it full time, a postdoc is generally a much shorter project. But yeah.
Thanks for clarifying. And now I wanted to ask again, this is going to be like an open floor question, and it's what of the skills that you developed in your PhD, and of those skills, which ones have you used the most in your professional career? These can either be, you know, the subject specific ones that you needed to do your job, or any of the other skills that you found yourself using. Might throw this out to Tom to start.
Got to find the unmute button. Yeah, I think one big thing, and it can be a little bit scary to the non-technical person, is the ability to code, which I did not know how to do at all before starting a PhD. So if that's you, don't be scared by that. A PhD is a great chance for you to learn how to code, tackling problems you want to tackle, which is one of the best ways of learning how to do that. So that is something I use literally every day, probably most of my day, every day, and the ability to just code. And I'm still learning. It's not like I know how to do it well now, but that is the one skill which has come out of PhD, which has been super, super helpful, and I could not do my job without. Some of the more, I guess, soft skills which I think have been helpful is like the ability to work independently. So someone might give you a very broad remit of please tackle this problem, and a PhD is that kind of very broad, here's a problem, go do some research, try and solve it. The ability to do that in any kind of job is actually really helpful. It means that your boss, your supervisor, doesn't feel like they need to kind of walk you through every single thing. They can trust you to have a play around and have a think about how you might solve things. So yeah, I'll give you those two things and let someone else have a speak.
I might latch
Genevieve?
on
Right.
to that.
Yeah. So can I go?
We'll go for Genevieve,
Yeah,
and then
okay.
to Anna Maria, if that's all right.
All right. So I think as you will all progress in your career, I think it's the soft skills that are the most important skills actually throughout. So your sort of, you know, mathematical skills or data processing skills, these are the foundation that you need to go through your PhD, and throughout your career you will keep needing that. But the ability to synthesize information is incredible, you know. So you have 3 years or 4 to go through an immense amount of information, and you'll have to pick and choose. You'll have to sort of select what is relevant, what is not, what fits in, you know, within your narrative. Obviously you don't pick and select your data, that's not what I'm trying to say, but within the context of the story that you're telling, you know, what is the focus of your research, what is your research question, and how do you synthesize that knowledge? So that will follow through your entire life. It's an incredible skill. I think perhaps, you know, beside that, the most important skill is the self-confidence. Once you've done a PhD, you've written a book, you've gone through conferences, presentation, you've presented in front of large audiences, you've been challenged in your viva, you've been able to defend your thesis. Once you've been through that grueling, I mean, at times it is grueling, the ups and the downs and these, you know, the basically mountains you have to surmount. You come out of that process thinking, well, if I can do this, there's pretty much nothing I can't do. So having that sort of attitude of can do is life-changing. Literally, it completely transforms your life and your approach to problem solving. The other thing is management. So I think, you know, when you enter your PhD, you think, okay, my supervisors will help me and they will guide me and all these things. Well, it's actually the other way around. It's you have to manage your supervisors. You have to set the meetings with them. You have to spoon feed them, literally. So you become the leader of your project, and you have to go and get the information from them because they're super busy. So they basically, you know, unless you actually create a relationship and manage that relationship, they'll, you know, some of them will kind of just let you through the cracks. So you have to be really proactive. So that's sort of management, and the list is long, but it's a life-changing journey. It really is. And the number of skills you'll get from this is, yeah, limitless. It's a wonderful journey. That's it.
I completely agree. And all of those skills as well are skills that you get really proud of while you're developing them. As like a current PhD student, I start to recognize when you are picking these things up. And now it's really great. Did Anna Maria want to go? And then Craig and Iqbal will chip in on this as well.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I just felt like I wanted to say that as somebody who is no longer a researcher, to me, the soft skills, it's total misnomer in reality. It's power skills. Those are the things that are the most important thing to my job, and the critical thinking, the communication. I need to sift through so many documents, and then I need to present recommendations to my line manager. And if I can't communicate, a 400-page document in 5 minutes, then I probably won't be able to convince her to fund this project that I really think is important to the scientific community. So these are skills you definitely develop during your PhD. You have to read and read a lot. As you get older, you probably have to read faster as well. That is definitely also something you will also learn. I mean, it's all a learning experience, your PhD. But I just wanted to echo that do not underestimate how important it is to communicate as well, do also engage in outreach activities during your PhD. They are really, really essential, and they also give you that confidence, as we just heard from Genevieve. So it really is one of those things. I mean, I'm not going to play down that, technical skills are really important too. I wouldn't be here without my technical skills, but at this stage, it's just being able to process and sift through information and present it in a coherent manner. That is what makes takes up most of my life, really.
Thanks, Anna Maria. Yeah, completely agree with all of those. And just a quick one as well for anyone who doesn't know, the word outreach is a word that we use sometimes in academia, and that's where you take your science to different audiences. So for instance, you might have done the most complicated research imaginable, and then can you try and communicate this to a 5-year-old in a school to inspire them how cool science is? So that's another really fun opportunity that you often have with doing a PhD is like taking science to different audiences. And following on still on the skills question, I think Craig wanted.
Thank you. I think I'm probably going to echo what a number of the panelists have already said. So for context, the most I could code before I joined the PhD was in Microsoft Excel, and my supervisor reminded me about this when I was about to submit my PhD, and I went, oh my gosh, look how far I've come. But for me, definitely the two things I've taken away from it was, one, it made my problem solving skills a lot more efficient. So I've been able to now take problems outside of my postdoc. So as an example, one of the things that I'm really interested in is the intersections of climate and race. But because of doing a PhD, what I've now been able to do is look at that really holistically, being able to take the skills that I've gained from a PhD and actually apply sort of like the social science aspect to the physical science aspect, which I don't think I would have been able to have done had I not done a PhD. And the second thing as well is this idea of really clear communication. So really being able to understand who my audience is. So if for example, I'm communicating to cloud physicists who all know aerosol microphysics at the same level that I do, then I can go into a lot of detail. However, if I'm communicating to, say, a bunch of 16-year-olds who are all, say, so as an example, I do a lot of outreach. So I do a lot of work to try and engage Black and minority ethnic groups into geosciences. If I'm communicating my science to them, I may go, it's not so much how the language sounds, but how relatable that language is. And these are skills that I picked up throughout the PhD, but this is also because with the PhD, you have a lot of flexibility with doing outside of research activities. And this is the one thing that I definitely highly encourage. So to kind of sum it up, problem solving and effective communication are the two things. And these are two skills that I'm still developing still as a researcher and as a future academic.
Thank you, Craig. I think I'd also like to ask a specific question to coding now, because we've talked about how transferable all of these soft skills are, but quite a few people mentioned coding as a skill. And I think that might be quite an intimidating skill to some people, because I came to the university and I looked at coding. I thought, wow, only the smartest people could maybe figure out how to do coding. Computer hackers on a film, maybe. Do you get support to learn coding? Is it something that you learn by yourself, just by typing away at the computer? Anyone with experience of coding wants to chip in? Craig?
Can I? Oh, great, good.
No, you go first.
Okay, so like these guys, I knew very little coding before starting my PhD. In fact, I didn't know what coding was, in fact, so it was very new. And luckily, I did my PhD at Leeds, but I suspect this is the case in most universities. They have lots of courses available for you to join and learn. I joined some of the undergraduate lectures on coding and their practicals, which I learned MATLAB with. And once you learn the basics, the real learning happens when you start solving your own problems with it, even with the basic code. So now I look back on my codes 5 years ago, I realized how terrible it was. But at that time, it solved the problem I had. And so and coding is a continuous process. When you see these things on TV and in the news, it's all the end process of decades of experience. But for most problems, you start very simple. How do I solve this complicated equation or simple equation? How do I fit a line through this data? Those are simple problems you learn to start with, and then you go on to building applications and apps and all that stuff. So never be intimidated, but also don't try and. It's helpful to learn online on these courses, etc. But I think it's always better to start with ask your supervisors or your friends or your colleagues to give you an example of simple code that you play with, and then you know how things work. I think that's a better way to learn than trying to go online and learn everything. That's intimidating in my mind.
Akbar, I actually want to kind of like, I guess, echo that. Before I started the PhD, the one thing I definitely found is that I was trying to do things like Code Academy, because everyone was like, you need to learn Python, you need to learn Python. Now, I don't know if it's just because of how my brain works, but I definitely know that I need to have a problem that I'm focusing on in order to ensure that I can kind of, I guess, break it down. And as well as also going to courses. So one thing to also note as well is, as a mathematician, I had no atmospheric science knowledge whatsoever. I didn't know what specific humidity was, which if you're a meteorologist is a very important thing to know. So the advantage of like my training program was that I had opportunities to go to a number of introductory lectures and introductory courses. The university were able to really offer that support in order to ensure that I had the basis. But then what I then found was then I ended up then going, okay, well, here is my coding issue. With the skills that I now have, how can I kind of break it down? And what I definitely found was that I was breaking it down in a way where essentially it was definitely a lot more, I guess, applicable. So that's something that I definitely found on the coding front.
Yeah, Tom?
Unmuted, classic. I think I saw Heather's hand as well, so I didn't want to jump in, but I'll say something quickly and then hopefully I'm not copying what you're going to say. Two quick things. One, Google is your friend with this, as in coding is intimidating, but usually someone else has solved the problem before you did. And half of the skill of coding is learning what to Google in order to try and solve your problem. There's loads of really useful resources out there. A lot of the time it's not courses, it's just a forum or something that someone's posted a problem on, and you pick up a bit of information about how you might solve yours. The second thing is that you're not alone in your PhD. You're usually with other PhD students, and they are one of the best resources for learning how on earth do I do this random thing. Like, I think you did this last week. Can you show me how you did that? So there's your colleagues, there's your peers, there's postdocs who are maybe a little bit kind of closer to the technical side than your supervisor might be. They might be more kind of big picture haven't touched code in ages, but postdocs might be able to really help you. So yeah, 2 things there.
Yeah, I was going to say kind of exactly that, actually. I was going to say that in my PhD, I didn't code either before my PhD, but I remember it was a really nice way to actually kind of bond with this postdoc that I was sharing an office with, because I was trying to code something in MATLAB and it just wasn't working. And it wasn't working, and eventually I just asked him to help, and he was really kind and just sat down with me, and he actually like wrote a script with me, and just like watching him do it like made me understand like how you should write things. And yeah, I think like actually getting other people to give you their code is really useful, because you learn like tricks and like tips of how things are done. And yeah, so it's actually a really nice way to connect, I think, with other people in your lab, which is kind of what you were saying as well, Tom.
I think there's been a couple of really nice points that have come up as a side to the coding as well. The fact that, Heather, you just mentioned the people in your office were really happy to help you, is that normally when you are doing a PhD, you are with other people. You know, you have a research group in your university and your institution, and the people in the years above you have done similar or might know the same skills and can help you. And also what Iqbal mentioned about doing undergraduate lectures, you know, typically when you do a PhD, it's more of a research project. But if there is a skill that you need and they teach it at the university, and you speak with your supervisor and say, I think I would really benefit from this skill, you're in a university that teaches so many things. So you often have lots of information available to you. And so I just think those are really nice bonuses as well, of all the skills that you will get in a PhD. Yeah, Iqbal?
Sorry, I just forgot to mention this earlier. I think coming back to the skills, something that's really, really important, I think, especially in this modern day of information overload, is the critical thinking skills we pick up and you learn as a PhD student. You learn to look at information and think and critically analyze it. How true is it? How do I find out, is it true or not? And those are, you know, you think it's a simple thing, but it's not. It's actually quite a tricky skill to learn. And you learn it over time throughout your PhD. And we were talking about this recently in the context of elections and fraud and data and coronavirus and rates and all those interesting numbers we have in the news and media today. How much do you know which ones to trust, and how much do you trust the ones you hear? Those are interesting questions we all have to deal with, and we do unconsciously every day. And the way you as a scientist, I look at it is a critical look at it. I look at the ratio, the numbers, the uncertainties, and you look at, okay, this number is from this source, from this experiment, with this uncertainty range, all that stuff. So those are the things the way a scientist would naturally think about when the numbers and information they see, but not everyone does. And actually we forget that not everyone looks at data the way we scientists do, because we've been trained to look at information in a different way. And that's really, really important and a valuable skill you'll take out of your PhD.
Yeah, I wanted to add to this. I thought that was a really good point, actually, Iqbal. And that ties in quite well with both the coding. How do you learn coding? And with that sort of, you know, the ability to transmit that knowledge. So as you'll go through your PhD, if you do need to learn to code, you know, initially there'll be a steep learning curve, and but once you've kind of hit that sort of initial sort of, you feel comfortable enough, and that goes with the critical thinking as well, is why don't you offer to teach? Why don't you take that opportunity to transfer that knowledge? And there is nothing better to consolidate knowledge than teaching. Because when you come and having children, so, you know, with young children, the same thing, you have to explain a really complex idea in quite a simple way. So you have to go through the entire mental process of finding ways to communicate that idea in a way that is understandable and that can bring someone up a notch in their learning journey. So it's a great way. It's not only a great way to engage with others, but it's a wonderful way for you to learn, really, because you have to know it. So it forces you to know it. But either teach coding or teach critical thinking, because God knows how much critical thinking is needed in this world. So yeah, go ahead and communicate.
May I just add to that as well? I'll turn my video off. I'm really sorry about my bandwidth today. So when I talk, you won't see me. But I just wanted to say that please don't forget that coding, you know, you're learning a computational language. Like any language, it will need practice, and you don't learn it just instantly. It's something you really need to sit at, and it can be intimidating at first, but you know, you stick to it, and you as many people here mentioned, you know, you ask your peers and you discuss it, and that's the way you take things on, and that's really something in your PhD that you will learn. You're doing independent research, but at the same time you are within this group and you're bouncing off ideas that will take you further. And you know, it's continuous development. In German we say man lernt nie aus. You will always continue learning, and don't be intimidated by that. We all start at the beginning.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Anna Maria. If nobody has anything extra they want to say immediately on skills now, I feel free to do so. But if not, I have another kind of question to the floor. And this is, I'm going to aim this firstly at Genevieve as an employer, and ask whether a PhD would make an applicant stand out from the crowd. We've had a question come in on the Q&A, and somebody has asked, saying, a PhD is a big commitment, and how could you get over the fear that, you know, are there going to be opportunities at the end of it? You know, yeah. Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, there will definitely opportunities. It is a huge commitment, but when you think, how can I put it? You know, there are more and more graduates. There are more, you know, the population is growing, and so is the graduate population. So a PhD is definitely a differentiator. And in my, you know, in my work, not my academic work, but my you know, entrepreneurship work, what I like about PhDs is that they are entrepreneurs, you know, and when you are creating, you know, and you're distributing an innovation, or you're making it available for others to use, you want someone that is able to take a problem that you have as part of your organization and just take it and carry it without, you know, someone else having to tell them how to do it. And that's especially true for spin outs and startups, you know, small companies that are really growing. So so for all the reasons that I gave earlier on, you know, the ability to synthesize, the ability to be a leader, to project manage, to you know, represent complex data in a simple way, you know, for all these reasons, a PhD is a wonderful process. And it's also I don't think there's any parallels in the private sector or in organizations. There's no way that, you know, any employer would give you 3 years, 4 years to focus on your own research question. Yeah, so it's a unique space to do that and to sort of bring that project to completion and to a successful ending. So so the answer is yeah. It, you know, a PhD is a wonderful thing. Yeah. But maybe I'm biased. I've done one and I thought it was great, and yeah. But I think so in general. It's a leadership skill. So yeah.
I have a question that links towards this, and it may be hard for us. Again, we may all be biased doing PhDs, but quite a few people here work at large organisations that have like in postgrad schemes. So like a lot of people might finish their undergraduate degree and go straight into a grad scheme. Are there any benefits to doing a PhD over a grad scheme? Because these are like two different routes that people may go down when they finished their first degree. Does anybody have any opinions on this? Genevieve?
Yes, I think they're very different. So, so I know, you know, the big, large consulting firms, Ernst and Young, you know, they all offer kind of graduate schemes. They are great. Yeah. So if you know what you want to do and you know that this is what you want to do, then a grad scheme is a really good route for you to sort of pursue a career. But it does not give you the same independent thought, critical thinking. You know what Iqbal was bringing earlier on. So you are being molded based on the corporate set of values and mission and what they want you to do over that during that graduate scheme. What you learn during a PhD is, yeah, again, it's that point of critical thinking, is that ability to sort of to systemize the way by which you come to a conclusion, right? So by analyzing the information that you have and bringing together that evidence to sort of inform your decision. And what if during your sort of, you know, graduate scheme, you come to the conclusion that, you know, you're not aligned, or your finding is not aligned with the company? So there might be conflicts of interest there, whereas in academia there won't be. Yeah, so you have, yeah, the path is yours, and you have the independence to examine a question, you know, front to end in detail, which you may not have in a sort of a graduate scheme in a corporate sector.
Does anybody else want to chip on this one? Heather, thank you.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say that sometimes it's not one or the other as well, because I actually worked for 2 years in industry before my PhD, and I found that all those skills that I learned there were also really helped in my PhD. But yeah, I just really missed doing science and wanted to kind of do the, you know, like have that time to really focus on a specific thing. And but yeah, I think you know, experience in different areas can be really helpful as well, and it's not necessarily one or the other, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point to highlight, isn't it? That you can go into industry and then come back and do a PhD at any time. You don't have to do your PhD as soon as you finish your undergraduate degree. You know, you can come anytime.
Can I also follow up on that point really quickly? Apologies, the bandwidth in my house is really bad, so my camera will be off for the rest of this. I definitely found that actually not doing a PhD straight away gave me a better appreciation as to why I was doing the PhD. I think sometimes we live in a day and age whereby we just go through the emotions of, I just need to do the undergrad and then do the master's and then do the PhD. But I definitely found that by me taking a step back, it allows me to work out what I really wanted. And I know that if, for example, if I went straight into a PhD, I would be doing a very completely different task now. I probably wouldn't be in environmental sciences. I probably wouldn't be able to have developed the skills in the areas that I wanted to do and make the changes that I wanted to make. But I definitely found that working before doing a PhD gave me some of the soft skills that actually gave me, I guess, a slight heads up. So in terms of like management, dealing with managers, being able to actually work out how to think about things in a holistic way, translating knowledge. It was things like that I didn't necessarily gain from my undergrad, but I was able to bring those skills from being in the workplace and bring it into the PhD, and then the PhD allowed me to strengthen that. So I do also resonate that you don't have to go straight into a PhD straight away. But the one thing I can definitely say is that for me, the big reason what made me want to do a PhD is that I wanted to do some really cool science, and I was going to have 3 to 4 years of an opportunity to do that. And that's something that I'd really encourage everybody to do.
Thanks, Craig. I think Anna Maria had something to say, and then we'll go to.
Yeah, so there's two things there. Definitely don't do a PhD because you think you need to do a PhD to get a job. That is absolutely not the case. You do a PhD in something you're passionate about, and you have this opportunity to spend 3 to 4 years to research it and to develop these critical thinking skills. But I think you really need to want to research this, and it's not something that you just do because you think afterwards you'll get a job out of it. And again, I also want to say that you don't have to do it straight after your undergrad or your master's. The European Space Agency, for instance, we offer a 1-year young graduate traineeship. It's not like the grad schemes that other organizations offer at all. It's just 1 year. You don't get a job afterwards at the European Space Agency. But depending on your field, you know, they kind of want you to get an insight into the space organization, and then you can take it on in industry, but also so I work for the climate office, and we deal with science. We encourage our YGTs to actually afterwards go and do a PhD, because it is important to our business, as it were, in science, to be able to understand what scientists need. And for that, doing a PhD is really essential. So, you know, if you've finished your master's and you want to work for the European Space Agency, you can come and work for us for a year and then go back and do a PhD. There's absolutely no reason you can't do that.
Thank you for those insights, Anna Maria. Really helpful. Iqbal, did you still want to contribute on this?
Yeah, I mean, Anna Maria's echoed what I wanted to say, but I also wanted to add that I guess there is a slight bias in this group answering that question, having all done PhDs. But I guess it's helped that some people have had experiences out before starting their PhD in industry. But the BGS, this is a really old organization, 150 or 60 odd years old. Not everyone has PhDs, as you imagine, but we are a research organization. So we're seeing there's a trend now increasingly, all our newer hires have PhDs. And unfortunately, that's the case, because when you set out a job advert that's very much research focused, people with PhDs apply to it. And then the competition is so much more that the PhDs generally win out, I'm afraid. Not that, and that's not to say that you need a PhD to work. We do have plenty of people at our organization who do amazing work who don't have PhDs, and they bring hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of projects into the organization. But if you want to stay in research, whether academic or outside academia, like organizations like the ones represented here, PhD, I would recommend doing a PhD.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to echo Anna Maria that a PhD is a long journey. It can be at time quite lonely, and especially in the context of COVID. So so I would really stress that you do a PhD because you want to. You know, I think it's important that, because you know, all careers are exciting, you know, so there's loads of other careers that don't require a PhD and where you can get into leadership positions. But it's a big commitment. It's a big financial commitment. It's a big personal commitment, and it's a big commitment on the start of your career also, you know, because very often when you finish your PhD, you do a postdoc. Potentially you do a postdoc after, before you actually get to a point where you have a salary to sort of fund your pension. Like, there's lots of things involved in doing a PhD that can slow you in starting your financial life as a family, as a, you know, as an individual, and all these things. So so it's a wonderful journey if you like it, you know, if this is something for you. But it's not a plug the whole kind of project where you say, I have nothing else to do, I'll do a PhD, because it'll be a long journey and a difficult one. So so yeah, I think it's definitely worth having a clear thought as to whether you like spending time, you know, researching a problem and trying to find an answer to that question. That's all.
Yeah, Tom.
I was just going to add that, yeah, we've all talked about the importance of wanting to do a PhD and a desire to do it. But I guess you might be thinking, well, how on earth do I know if I want to do a PhD? And I think this is where, if you get the chance in your undergraduate to do a research project or something like that, do take that opportunity, because that will give you a flavour. It will be a lot shorter. You won't get as much done. You'll feel like you have no idea what you're doing half the time, but it will give you a flavour of research, of what it means to kind of be thinking about a problem and trying to solve it and doing this kind of research. So whether you can do an undergraduate one or a master's one, which is a bit shorter, and you know, it isn't committing yourself to 3 or 4 years, it's committing to 6 months or a year or something, and that's a good way of trying to get a feel for whether you enjoy that kind of thing. Yeah.
And don't be shy to like talk to well, to look into what kind of research projects are out there and talk to the profs involved, because I'm sure you could ask to work with them in the summer. I mean, basically I got into remote sensing of permafrost because I just sent an email to the Vienna Institute of Technology's Institute of Remote Sensing and said, oh, I saw you've got this ESA project on permafrost. Is there anything I can maybe do for you just on the side? And they were like, yeah, why not? You know, it was me taking the initiative, saying, oh, I could bring all these skills to this, and they were very grateful for the contribution that came from my little side project.
Can I just add something along those lines? Combining what Tom and Anna Maria have just been saying, you don't have to just do these projects in your spare time. You can do it for your undergraduate as well. So for your undergraduate, for your bachelor's and master's, you generally need to do some sort of dissertation project towards the end of your degree. And sometimes you can do it with your university's lecturers, professors, but other times they give you the freedom to explore opportunities elsewhere. And I really recommend you guys to get in touch with people like us or organizations like ours and say, look, I'm trying to think about doing my master's project or my bachelor's project. Can I work with someone in your organization? These are my interests. And we get this every now and then at the BGS, and we all pounce on it because it's great, because we have so much work that we don't have time to do it. And we have this really cool idea that we want to work on. And now someone just said, oh, can I help you? And I'll say, great, you can solve this problem for me. We'll work together. And so send me an email if you want to do a project. I've got loads. But it's not just me, but generally, don't be afraid to email, like as Anna Maria said, to organizations or people within organizations saying, look, I've got these skills and I'm interested in doing a project over a couple of weeks or even several months.
Yeah, I think those are all really great tips that you may get multiple emails now, hopefully, for help on all of your projects. So I'm going to ask again this is going to be the last broad question before we go on to some of the Q&As, because we've had quite a lot of Q&As submitted by the audience. So I was just going to ask if you could very quickly, maybe like one sentence, I'm hoping you're going to say yes. Are you glad that you did a PhD? And if yes, why? But I'm hoping you'll say yes, that's why you're here. Iqbal, would you like to start?
Absolutely, of course. Not just because of the wonderful learning I've done and my small addition to the field of knowledge in my field, tiny little soil sample, but more about the people I've met. I've met some great people. In fact, I met my boss and his boss at a conference, and that conversation spurred on to a proposal for my postdoc. And then another conversation with them gave me the job I have right now that I love to bits. And now that takes me all over the world. Well, when it's not COVID, I travel a lot and I love it. And it's not just because of the PhD, it's because of the people I've met through the PhD. And I get to work on problems that I feel are helping people. And that, for me, is quite fulfilling.
Thanks, Iqbal. Thank you. I'll go to Tom next.
Yes, I am glad. I won't deny there were times when I was not enjoying it, as I'm sure everyone does in a PhD. But overall, when I look back, I'm really glad I did it. And I think, like, just think about it. You have the opportunity for 3 or 4 years to essentially study whatever you're interested in, and to try and answer these kind of questions. And that is a real privilege, and a real opportunity. So I'd say go for it, because it is just an amazing chance you have to study what you're actually interested in, and kind of dictate what you want to work on, within reason. So yeah, go for it.
Thanks. Anna Maria?
So unmuted. I actually love the fact that we probably all think along the same lines. I mean, yeah, I just could echo what was said before. You know, the people I met during my PhD, you know, not just actually in my field, but in even beyond, just within the institute and also at my college that I was at. I just had this really amazing time doing my PhD, and you know, I'd been at university for a long time before then. I did an undergraduate physics degree, master's degree at Edinburgh actually, and then I went back to Vienna, where I'm from, and did a 2-year master's degree there. So I experienced a lot of taught course time at university, and then suddenly doing this PhD was such a different experience, and a really enjoyable one. And yes, of course, it was hard towards the end. You know, the last 6 months are intense, but you know, you learn to push forward, and also you also take on that, you know, time management is really important, and you know, that's I hold on to that in my current job. I really know that I need to work on time management, and yeah, just taking charge of what I wanted to research. And then you really, somebody said this before, I'm afraid I don't remember who, but you really don't get that opportunity again later. Not so much. Maybe in academia, maybe there's a different experience there, but certainly not in industry. You get to do what your line manager tells you to do. Yeah, I am absolutely glad I did a PhD, and would fully recommend doing one.
Thank you. And now I think I'll ask Heather, then Genevieve, then Craig.
Okay, so I would say the same as everyone else. I agree with what everyone is saying. Yeah, it was really great being able to do a PhD. At the time, I remember a very difficult year at the end, and it was quite hard. But yeah, it's like the one opportunity you have to just really go into depth in something. And you know, I really love understanding things in depth, and that was sort of the opportunity to do that. And yeah, and I think it's also like just such a nice kind of training ground where you can also make mistakes, and the stakes are not that high. You're not kind of, you know, working for an organization where what your work, you know, can have a really big effect. It's a really nice kind of training ground as well. So yeah, I really enjoyed it.
I'll be brief. Same as everybody else. I'll add something new, is the network. So over 3 years, you're going to spend amazing time with your cohort of PhD student friends. And then for the rest of your life, you know, you've got people in New York working for the World Bank, and then people in South Africa, Conservation International, and then X and Y and Z. And around the globe, you've got this incredible network of really close friends that you really ended up working at until 2 in the morning, and, you know, with a stack of snacks and all that stuff. It's just, yeah, it's fun.
Thanks, Genevieve. And finally, Craig, if you're still there, are you glad to do the PhD?
Yes, I'm glad to do a PhD. So I'm probably going to take a more kind of pessimistic / realist approach to this. PhD is hard. PhD is not all fun and roses. There are times where I was in the office till like 3 o'clock trying to work over a problem, but that's literally because that's how my brain works. And there were points where I kind of questioned, am I good enough to do this? That said, the one thing I liked about doing a PhD is that it gave me the opportunity to just, I guess, explore areas of research that I wouldn't have necessarily done before. Even within a postdoc, you still have the objectives of what the supervisor wants, what the PI wants, whereas with a PhD, you've got the freedom to basically dictate your own research. It allowed you to refine your ways of problem solving that you wouldn't necessarily do. And I like to think of a PhD like a marathon, like so I did a half marathon a few years ago. The final 3 miles were absolute hell, but you become a much stronger person by completing it. And I definitely felt that when I submitted my PhD, that I actually realized how much I grew as a person. And I don't think I would have had that had I not done a PhD. So yes, I'm glad I've done it.
No, thank you for those insights. Definitely valuable for us. So this will take us on, this links quite nicely actually to our audience questions. We've got quite a few of them to try and get through. So I'm just going to ask if only one or two people could answer each one. But Craig just briefly mentioned on this one, have you ever thought, I'm not smart enough, how can I do this? Am I capable of finishing this PhD? If anybody has ever wondered that.
I can start that question as well. So just for some context, the number of Black British people who have completed a PhD in urban environment, I would be the 3rd person in the school's history. And the reason I like to mention that state is because the reality is that I didn't see anybody who looked like me do a PhD, and I can definitely tell you that that's a really big deterrent for Black British people wanting to go into academia. But one thing I definitely found was that having supportive mentors and having people around me tell me actually that my science is good enough was the main thing. And I think the thing that I definitely really stuck with me is that doing a PhD, you're not trying to solve the biggest world problem. Doing a PhD gives you the skills to be able to address the big problems. And the way that I realized I was ready to submit my PhD was because I was able to know what I didn't know. And once I knew that, then that's when I was like, I'm ready to submit my thesis. So I do definitely sympathize with the imposter syndrome. I still have it now as an academic, and I still have it now as I put myself forward for really big positions. But the one thing I can definitely say is that having a really strong support network, and like for myself, I'm part of what's known as the African Caribbean Research Collective, and actually being around other Black British people who are in academia, I've definitely found that organizations like that have really helped me feel confident as being in my science. And actually you find that once you realize you're not the only person who feels like this, the fear starts to subside, and then you then feel a lot more grounded in what you do. So that's my personal experience on that.
Thank you, Craig. Genevieve?
Yes, I think, to be honest, I don't think there's anybody that feels smart enough to do a PhD, to be honest. I think it's such, when you start that journey, you just think, my God, this is, first, the people you see above you are professors with, how many years of experience and research, with all that wealth of knowledge, and they have it so easy and all these things. So I think if anybody tells you they're smart enough to do a PhD, well, I think they're lying. thing, because the reality, like anything else, is that for any success in life, it's 95% effort and it's 5% talent. You just have to plow through, learn the skills you need, and if you have the dedication to learn and the dedication to do it, you'll do it. So, yeah.
Thanks, Genevieve. Did you want to say something, Iqbal?
There's very little I can add that the guys haven't said, but imposter syndrome, you never leaves you behind, I'm afraid. And it's not just for PhD students, it's for absolutely everyone. And not just imposter syndrome, it's the mental health that comes with it sometimes. Sometimes you'll have ups and downs in your mental health. And again, this is so general, it's not just for PhDs, it's for absolutely everyone. You go through ups and downs of mental health and you start questioning whether your abilities, start questioning yourself, whether I faked it in, or whether I'm good enough to write this proposal or do this paper or whatever. It never leaves you, and this is something that you will learn as you come to terms with these things. That it's not just you. It's very rarely about yourself. It's everyone has these thoughts, and Genevieve said it as well as anyone. It's 95% effort and 5% talent. It's more about your grit.
Thank you. So I have another question here from the Q&A, and this is, if you don't see yourself working in academia, would you recommend doing a PhD, especially if you're taking out 4 years of your career? That's open to the floor for anybody. Genevieve.
Maybe I should answer that. I don't know.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it probably, well, it goes back to, are you passionate about this research you want to do? Because you will be able to get a job after your PhD outside of academia. So don't be worried about that. Are you really into doing research for 4 years? It's a big commitment, and it should be something, yeah, you have to think about it carefully. But again, I'd like to stress, you don't have to go into academia after your PhD. There are other opportunities, lots of opportunities, with international organizations later on, it's a difficult question to answer, because it sort of implies you need to kind of know where you want to head. Don't do it just for the job, is what I want to say. Please, Genevieve. Yeah.
I would support that. I'd say, analyze very closely why you want to do a PhD and where you want to go. And what I would do, very pragmatic approach to decision making, but I would think about where I want to go, so where you want to be, because it seems from that question that you have quite a clear idea of where you want to go, and map out the different routes to get there. PhD, it can be volunteering work, it can be experience in X domain, can be another MSc, and let's say you've got an MSc in statistics, and then you want, to go into policy, so you want international politics, whatever it is. I would just map those routes and write the pros and cons, and I think you have to assess that starting your career, if you have a point, clearly in your mind, with 4 years delay, if the PhD is not necessary, it's bringing you back. So you have to think specifically what you want to. It's very difficult for us to answer, but think about what you want to achieve, because there's plenty of ways for you to get where you want to go.
Thank you. I'll move on to the next question, and I can't actually see you all for this to work. I was gonna say, if you could raise your hand if you did an internship in your PhD. Did anybody on this panel do an internship? Were they available? Genevieve?
So I did an internship. I don't know whether it was called at that point an internship, but I was asked to work on the IPCC good practice guidance for land use change and forestry, like a very long and I during that time that would have taken me a big chunk of my time out of my PhD. So yeah, I took I took that time off. I said, I'm breaking up my PhD. I'm going to take 6 months, write that, chapter, contribute to this, and then that'll be it. And yeah, why not? Yeah, I mean, if it's something you want to do, then I'd say absolutely do it.
Yeah, Iqbal.
I just wanted to say I didn't do an internship, but it's also one of my biggest regrets of my PhD that I didn't, because I found the most amazing internship opportunities after my PhD, which I thought, damn it, I wish I'd done that during my PhD, because part of the reason why I didn't do it is because I didn't know about them. There are loads of great internship opportunities specifically for PhD students at the UN, at the Disaster Risk Management, Epidemiology for Disaster. Oh gosh, but the Epidemiological Research Institute for Research in Disaster Risk Reduction in Belgium. If you're UK funded by NERC or UKRI, they will pay you your 3-month salary to take time off your PhD to work in the Parliamentary Office of Science and Technology, and that's only for UKRI funded PhD students. And so there are loads of these opportunities dotted around, and if you're into Earth observation, the UN SPIDER has a fantastic internship opportunity for PhD students working at the UN with Earth observation images. So if you want to, there are opportunities out there. You just need to go and find them, and that's the hard bit actually. But email people like us. We'll probably have a list of missed opportunities when I was a PhD student list. Yeah, I recommend it, but you don't have to, of course.
Yeah, thank you, Iqbal. Yeah, I think most institutions would support you doing an internship in your PhD, and actually all of our PhD students with the SENS CDT do a 3-month placement now, and the Panorama DTP support placements as well. And so I just thought I would mention that on the end of that question. So I have a question here. I think we've kind of touched on it, but it says like, I am XX years old. Do you think it's too late to start a PhD? Is it ever too late to start a PhD? I'm seeing shake of the head. Iqbal.
Someone asked this on Twitter a few weeks ago, actually, this exact question, and there's a fantastic thread of people who responded saying, I'm 42 and I've just started a PhD, or I'm so-and-so old, and I'm 65 and I started a PhD. So there isn't age, it's just passion and drive to learn and try to solve a problem, a scientific problem in a field.
Oh, great, thank you. And now I have a question for Craig, and this is, how would you rate the importance of the name or reputation of the place you do a PhD for going into academia afterwards?
For me, I would definitely argue that the relationship with the supervisor is so much more important than the reputation of the department. So it's a bit of a tricky one for me, because for me, first and foremost, I want to feel comfortable that because I'm probably going to be the only Black person in the department, that I'm going to be comfortable. That's the first thing. But then after I get through that, I definitely found that I picked my project based on the relationship with my main supervisor, who I'm still in contact with now. And the reason as to why I said that's really important is because essentially a supervisor-supervisee relationship is something I've never experienced before. Like, I've had line managers before, but with a supervisor-supervisee relationship, like it can get very personal without getting very personal. And I know that there were points whereby I was starting to doubt myself, not knowing if I was good enough, not knowing if my ideas were good enough, having really horrible experiences sometimes at conferences because of what people say about my research. And then I then go to my supervisor, and if I didn't feel comfortable with me talking to my supervisor about stuff, then I couldn't do any good science. So in the end, I figured that it was more important for me to have a good supervisor for me to do good science, as opposed to being able to do good science and having a supervisor that didn't care about my welfare. And something that I definitely will vouch for, and it's something that I always tell PhD students, is talk to the supervisors. If you've got a good rapport, if you feel that your vibes and your spirits are on the same level, then that's a legit thing. If, on the other hand, you feel that there may be some initial tensions, I know people who felt there's some initial tensions with their supervisors from the get-go, and it was just more that their working patterns and the way that they both funk didn't just match. And that's something that I will defend. And I stuck with that point from when I started the PhD, and I stick with that point now.
Yeah, I think everyone would absolutely echo that you need a supervisor that you can speak to, a supervisor that will support you academically and personally through the journey of your PhD. Absolutely, yeah. So we are running short of time, but we do still have some questions. So I think what we will do is say that any remaining questions in our Q&A, we will try and answer in our supplementary information that we will send out towards the end of the week. And in the meantime, I do have a final question, and I would just like to ask if our panelists have any final advice for applicants and for current PhD students. Any advice at all that you would like to give our audience? Yeah, Tom, thank you.
I guess just during a PhD can be all-consuming if you're not careful. Now, some of that is good because you're interested in it and you're passionate about it, but sometimes it can be all-consuming in a bad way. And so I guess my piece of advice would be make sure that during your PhD, you're not just doing your PhD. You kind of have boundaries and have a life outside of PhD, and try and kind of enjoy the city you're in, and the other things that are going on in your life as well. Just, yeah, make sure that you have the PhD in the right perspective would be my bit of advice.
Great, thank you, Tom. Genevieve?
Sure. Yes. Okay. I guess I would echo that. I think when you become so immersed in your PhD, there's always a danger that you define yourself through your work. I mean, that applies to any kind of workplace or anything, you know, whatever you spend most time doing, you define yourself by. So by diversifying the things that make who you are, you know, you can like knitting or mountain biking or something else, means that if at some point your PhD, and it will it will becomes really difficult, you have other things that you know you associate with, that define you, and that you find yourself valued by, you know, friends and family. And so it's making sure that, yeah, just as Tom highlighted, that you have a diversity of things and it's not all occupying, because at times it will feel like it is like that. Yeah.
Thank you. I think Iqbal next.
Again, so as well as the topics that Tom and Genevieve just said, which are really, really important, I wanted to just recommend that don't sit on problems. If you're genuinely stuck on something, ask. And I bet you someone, probably in the same office as you, has had that same problem before. And if you don't ask for help, it's very difficult for people to know that they need to help you. There's plenty of help out there, whether it's for a specific coding problem, or even just how do I apply for financial support to do this or that, or how do I write a grant proposal, or how do I do this? Ask for help. If you don't want to bother your supervisors, who are generally quite busy, unfortunately, there are postdoctoral students, other lecturers who may have some more time who can help you. Don't be afraid to ask if you get stuck. And you can spend many months stuck on a problem that could have been solved quite easily just by asking someone. So don't do that. And for undergraduates who want to do PhD students, apart from the SENS and the doctoral training programs that exist, keep an eye out on the PhD job lists or even specific university boards, because not all PhD students are funded through these doctoral training programs. Sometimes a grant will get awarded. We might win like £1 million grant on a project, and we need a PhD student now. And now happens to be February, not the normal October starting then. So we might advertise for a PhD student in February. So just keep an eye out for those opportunities. You might miss them. Got PhDs advertise now, apply for mine. It's fully funded too, in fact. So yeah, those kind of things come out, and just keep an eye out on the boards.
Thank you. Thanks, Iqbal. Yeah, Heather.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're doing a PhD, I really recommend having a bit of a break afterwards, because I did a postdoc, but I specifically requested 3 months off after my PhD, and it's really worth, not going into your next role tired and still stressed. So I just really recommend that. And yeah, if you're thinking of doing a PhD, I just wanted to say what was said before. If you're, worried that you can't do it or that you're not good enough, but you really want to, I would just go for it, because yeah, just go for what you want and try and make it work, basically.
Great advice. Thank you. And then we'll try Anna Maria.
Yeah, so actually there's something I want to say that Iqbal said, ask for help, but also give help. Yeah, you know incredibly loads, and there will be others who will need your help, and you can support them. This is undergraduates. You might be somebody they look up to. You can be that role model that they can look up to. So do also engage in the teaching that you can do at university when you're doing a PhD, because not only will it help you consolidate your own learning, but it also, you're representing something that other people can aspire to. Role models are really, really important in life, and will also help others understand, better deal with imposter syndrome and that sort of thing. If we can, sort of empathize with other people better, we can also understand that we all have these problems and that it takes time to learn. So yeah, ask for help, but also give help.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And then finally, Craig, if you have any last words of advice before we conclude.
Yeah, sure. Don't ever feel that in order for you to get the PhD that you shouldn't be yourself. And I make that as a very solid statement. I know that when I started the PhD, I definitely was finding that I was policing how I spoke, was really careful for what I wore, was really watching my tone in the office. But I found that I was being disingenuous to myself as a researcher. And I've now definitely found that as I got further into the PhD, the more that I was myself and I was able to put my personality into the way that I did research, the more that my ideas and creativity were allowed to then diverse. So much so that if you read my PhD thesis, I've got theatre quotes at the beginning of every one of my chapters. And that's something that I did on purpose, because I said that it allowed me to be able to bring my personality into my research. And I say this because I hear a number of people who go, oh, I need to tone myself down, or I need to not be myself. But it can be very exhausting to pretend that you're something that you're not. So just it's okay to be yourself, and you are good enough to do a PhD. So that's my final words.
Thank you very much, Craig. Thank you. And before we summarise, I just want to show you that we do have a new another session next week also. So if anyone has found today interesting or inspiring and thinks that they would like to do a PhD, we hope that we have managed to show that there are careers outside of academia. There are lots of opportunities in academia, but also we've hoped that we've demonstrated the skills that could take you where you want to go. So next Wednesday, we do have another session, and that's on support for applications. So we'll talk through the applications process, and it'll be joined by a panel of recent applicants that have all started their PhD in the last year or so. and maybe any tips and tricks on applying for PhDs. And I really want to say a massive thank you to all of the panelists that joined us today. Yeah, thank you so much for giving your time and talking about these really important matters. Yes, thank you very much. And we are hoping now to try and put a little survey in our chat. And I'm hoping Ruth is able to do that for us. I'll just stop sharing the screen. This is, again, what we're having next week. And it'll be found on Eventbrite, just like the event for today was. Everyone here has booked through Eventbrite. So hopefully you'll be able to find it.
Frances, I'm afraid I have to go because I've got another meeting starting now.
No,
but
that's fantastic.
Good luck, everyone. And yeah, good luck in your journey. And lovely to meet you, all the other panelists.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So much,
Bye. Bye.
Also, can I just add to Francis? Sorry, Jennifer, not to leave you behind. If people have any specific questions about the BGS or my work at the BGS, please feel free to share my email, and I'll happily, when I get time. Sorry, I'm also one of those people that may reply to an email the day after. I'll reply to them when I can.
Great, thanks, Iqbal.
Also, like I said, we also have 2 funded PhDs available, so they're fully funded. I think they're on the BGS website, so apply for them if you're interested in tectonics.
And if we are plugging PhDs, the Sense CDT and Panorama DTP PhDs are also on our websites and on findaphd.com as well. And finally, last bit of admin, we've just got a small survey in the chat now. If you've got a couple of minutes, we're just really interested to see where people have joined us from today. We know we had quite a few panelists from around the world, attendees from around the world. So we'd be quite interested to see who's managed to join us today. That would be really great if you could fill that in. Oh, and Ruth has put our adverts for our projects in. Iqbal, feel free to pop your advert in the chat as well.
I can't possibly find them online, so but if you're interested, send me an email and I'll share it with you.
Great, thank you. So again, we hope this has been really useful for anyone considering a PhD or currently doing their PhD and needed that little boost that you have lots of exciting career prospects at the end of it. So yes, thank you again for joining us, and please do check out the links in the chat.